course in San Francisco. Okay, but he's also come back to India. Both of us are brothers, and we are trying to upskill students. So that's the path we are in. So Vibin, over to you. Why don't you take over the interview prep?
So you're not audible. I think your mic is.
Yeah, yeah, I think it should be fine. Is it better now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's see. From current slide. Okay, folks. I was saying normally when you go for interviews, you have a couple of different interview types that students come in touch with. Firstly, there's something called technical interview rounds. So if you're an engineer going, whether it's for software development roles or for a mechanical engineer role or for civil engineering roles, you will definitely hit interview questions that are very specific to your domain. So um, all that requires is to get some expertise in your field. So we'll not touch on those points, which is a little bit more custom to the field that you are in. But we'll also hit something called a secondary mode of interviews that is very popular these days. That is what you would see in most of the interviews that you sit on. It doesn't matter what company it is, but you will face something called a star interview. It's also called a HR interview process. Okay, so we'll step into that. So firstly, what is STAR framework? There's yesterday we talked about it a little bit in your resume preparation, but it is necessarily breaking things down into the situation that was available at the time that you joined work or you're trying to explain something, the task that was assigned to you, the actions that you performed, and the results that you achieved. This is a framework that you would use to actually talk about any of your experiences. Okay, and this is a common method or a measure that is used for all interviews within the HR interview practice, as we call it. Okay. So how is it worded? It's normally like this: like, tell me a time that you led a team of people and describe what you did. Right. So that could be a question. Or it could be things like tell me a time when you actually worked with limited resources to get a certain kind of work done. Was it a success or failure? What did you do to achieve it? These are typically questions that you would face from the recruiter onto the interview panel, and we will discuss how you would go about addressing these set of questions. Okay. So coming again to STAR, why is that important? Firstly, these are also called behavioral questions. The reason is because uh, people been have to be measured against one another, right? So you have to find a way in which how do I grade you with respect to everybody else who's interviewing. Okay, and one of the common things that is assumed is that your past experiences and the past work is actually a good measure of how you would perform in future. Okay, so if you recount incidences that have happened in the past and you're able to talk about what you did, I can then infer what is your work culture and also how you have actually performed on a work, and consequently be comfortable handing you similar kind of work. Okay, so that is the idea of a HR interview process compared to say something's very different that you would see, for example, in UPSC exams, right? Which is more like some questions that are related to tell me about the financial policy within the country and then talk about it, right? These are not quantifiable and have no measure of how you would actually execute it. These are great intellectual questions, but they do not know whether you can execute it and execute them successfully, versus describing a situation where you executed things successfully and reached some sort of conclusion is necessary for a company, because end of the day company hires people to get work done. Okay, so that's the first part. So behavioral interviews are what are commonly used these days across companies. Secondly, your answers can be calibrated with respect to everybody else. So if you answer versus someone else answer, I can measure you versus that someone else and decide who's a better candidate. Okay, and so what is being measured is a bunch of skills and your percentage of fit with respect to skills. So yesterday we talked all of what happened. Um, Sorry, folks. So continuing again. So yesterday we talked about skills and how you are how you and actually map it out. Today we're going to talk about how you would actually go ahead give a quantification for those skills that you possess. So if you are say someone who has had experience in say software development process, or if you are a consultant who has had experiences say doing working on a certain strategy, how can I quantify you versus someone else onto that skill? So what is being measured is always a skill, and it is going to be a quantification of you with respect to someone else. Okay. So where are these behavioral interviews, these star interviews or HR interviews as they are called, where are they used? Okay. So if you look at it, they are very critical in roles like finance, consulting, sales, product management, general management. There are less so with respect to software related roles, very purely technical roles where you work as an individual contributor. um, as an engineer or as a software engineer, very specifically a software engineer, you would face a HR interview or a star interview round, but mostly it will be in the end state where you actually interview with the HR person or you will interview with the director of the company. Okay. And there it is a criteria whether are you a fit for the team, should I hire you for it. So it is not used to actually filter people out, it is used to actually select people in, and there's a difference, right? So you'd be one out of say two candidates who are being considered. At the end of the day, they would like to see that you are a good candidate who will fit in with the team. So it is necessary to again talk with the fit, talk about the skill, how you would actually fit with the company, and therefore HR interview is also important there, even though it will not help you clear all the technical rounds. Okay. So focus on software engineering roles might be 4 rounds on technical skills and 1 round on HR, versus consulting or a product manager would be that 3 rounds, all of them are HR, these HR interviews and a few cases, case study interviews that may be given. Okay. So we will not talk about case study interviews, we'll not talk about technical interviews, or we'll not talk about group interviews, like for example you would do if you're going for an MBA practice. But we will talk today specifically about one type of interview, which is going to be a large determinant of how you would actually clear the interview process. Okay, again, a star framework is you have to describe. So no project can have things just thrown in, right? You cannot walk into a project without understanding what is the situation you walked in. So you talk about the situation you walked in, you talk about the task that was given to you, or the task that you assumed that you would have to complete. You'll have to define a clear set of actions you did. Actions are going to be the meat of the arguments or the discussions. So for example, if a question is asked, if you're going to spend 5 minutes on a question, 3 minutes are going to be related to the actions and the kind of like frameworks that you used to actually get work done. And finally, you will always end with what did you achieve. So you'll give some quantification, you'll give some numbers, you'll give some outcomes and results. This is what helps the person identify that you are actually able to deliver on work and hence compare you with someone else, right? Okay. So so some of the questions, like we have listed on a couple of them, like how did you handle a direct disagreement with your manager, right? This is normally a trick question, and you'll be asked about how did you handle the situation. So there are lots of star questions. We'll not describe every one of these star questions, but we will go ahead and share some of the examples. In the meantime, I would like to take one example and maybe give you guys an idea of what the answer could be. So one of the things that I want you guys to think about is the answer is not about trying to show how awesome you are, or which is the most awesome workplace you worked in. So for example, this was a problem that I faced. So initially, when I was trying to interview for companies in say US, I would go ahead try to find out the best companies that I worked with, or the best way to showcase the 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 company that I worked with. That is not critical. Important is you talk about skills that you bring onto the table. So for example, if the question is, tell me a time that you worked with a team or managed a team, right? And talk about whether you're able to like lead the team to certain success. Okay, if that is a question, it's normally a question that could be asked to see if you're a team player. Okay. um, I have work experience in say Amazon. I have work experience in HPE. I have work experience in Salesforce. I work the experience in Samsung. But majority, all of them were as an individual contributor. Okay. So if someone were to ask me about a team experience, it is better not to use those experiences where I had roles as an individual contributor, right? Where I was doing work on my own, right? As a strategist, as a planner, and rather do work, talk about work that I did as a team. And to do that, let me talk for an example. So I am now working with a startup. Okay, compared to the big names like Salesforce or HP, the startup is very small. It has a very limited impact. But that is not critical for me. What I want to talk about is my role and my work experience. So let me say, let me begin. Hey, I joined as a the CTO of a startup, which of course I also founded. And so that is the situation. And the situation is I'm trying to grow the startup to ensure that it is able to help. So in my case, it's a company called Career Board, which is trying to help students to actually grow a network and improve their career. So the task given to me was try to build systems that help people to actually go achieve it rather than have direct one-on-one communications to ensure make that happen. Okay, so to do that, I had to build a bunch of technical solutions. Some of them are related to building a website, some of them are related to building an application, and therefore I hired a team, right? And the team are actually students, since we wanted to do it at a very low cost or a low budget. We didn't want to splurge money into building technology, so we hired a bunch of students. So therein comes a problem. I have a bunch of students who are trying to build technology. We're coming in with various different skill levels. So as a manager, I had to go ahead, one, skill level them up. Number two, ensure that they have the required skills or system designs to actually achieve their ends. And thirdly, ensure that the product is developed at a certain meaningful time frame, which is a few months to a year, right? So given this, what I did is I set up weekly team meetings to help ensure that people communicate between themselves and also have knowledge dumps from me. Number two, I built a repository of information on technical skills development. Number three, we did online coding sessions where I would actually look at the code and code review and then help engineers or this case students actually skill level up. Number four, I actually went ahead, did system design for that, actually put the entire things together so that there is a framework for how to develop stuff. Consequently, at the end of it, we had an application developed at the end of 1 year, which allowed for recruiters to hire directly from the student pool that we have. And also, consequent to this, we had a bunch of technical interns who had been extremely successful in their job. So students who have worked with Career Board have had very successful career, both getting jobs in a very difficult job market, as well as applying to some of these best universities abroad and going for their further studies. Okay, I stop over there. So as you can see here, the situation, task, action, result was laid out with actions clearly spelled out. The key thing was I was able to talk about some success measures, not only for the company, but also for the students. Okay, there are some quantification related to people getting jobs and apps being successfully launched. I could talk more about like how it was able to succeed in the market, but I can allow that for a conversation. Okay, so this is how you talk about the situation, task, action, result. You don't name call or try to say I worked with say Elon Musk or someone else to get things done. What you want to do is you want to talk about the skills or activities you did that was able to achieve a certain task, so that you can say, hey, in this case, I was a manager, I led some people. Ideally I should have said, oh, I had 10 people working with me, which I didn't. But ideally I should have talked about that situation to saying I managed 10 people, to give a number for how many people I managed. Okay, so let's move on. Again, companies are trying to find out how you are a fit with respect to past experiences. Therefore, that you are not stranger to the kind of role you are in, not to the sector you are in. You are not, like, for example, if you're a product manager, you better have had product management experience, and therefore you know everything related to that technology as well as everything related to that workplace you are in. Okay, that's what companies want to hear. Okay, so jargons. Let's stop here for a moment. So um, before I move on to jargons and other things, is a scope of what I explained for star and why is it important? Is that clear for the audience here? Are there any quick questions that anyone has, like burning questions that can't wait till the end? Any thoughts that you want to add, Vinod?
So, folks, the reason why you're focusing so much on star interviews is because most interviews generally have technical people talking to you or HR people talking to you. Every HR interview is always a star question. They always use the same set of questions to ask in the star format. So be ready with star interviews for HR questions. Also, nowadays, many of the technical interviews, half of them are pure tech, half of them are moving towards star interviews. The reason why star interviews are helpful is because it gives the same question to multiple students. So using one common rubric or a checkbox, you can actually evaluate multiple students using the same framework. So I'm sensing that a lot of people working in big tech, even technical recruiters, are using the star format to evaluate the answers from students. So if there is one takeaway from this session is that prepare for star questions, prepare for that in advance, and we'll show you how to do it. So the more you prepare, the more success you will have. I'm going to stop there. Other questions from anyone? Okay, there's one question from Monica, which is how do we respond to HR connecting with us on LinkedIn and discussing about our work and past experience? Okay, so hey, I'm going to talk about this because I worked as an HR director for a long time, and the way this works is if there's someone who reaches out from the company trying to talk to you, that means they're very interested in you. It is not a random conversation; they're seriously interested in you. So any conversation you have with anyone in the company, treat it like a proper interview process. So, for example, if you're having a Zoom call, be formally dressed. Make sure that you're prepared for the interview. You can ask some good questions. So, at the end of every interview, they'll ask you things like, "Do you have any questions for us?" Don't be silly and say, "Hey, I have no questions for you." Right? That's a disaster. Have good questions. Prepare. And if somebody from HR reaches out, that really means that they have something for you. So, have a discussion with them. If you're just chatting with them, try to say, "Hey, I want to have a 5 or 10 minute face-to-face conversation on Zoom. Is that possible?" Right? Try to make it more personal. You build a relationship, and getting a job is all about building the relationship. The more the time they invest in you, the more they're going to take you seriously. And when you talk about a previous experience, don't just talk about what you did. Always look at the job description in the way we described yesterday. Look at the skills and try to link your experience with the skills as defined in the job description. I'm going to stop here. Vibin, over to you.
Yeah, we can also talk a little bit on this towards the end about some of the questions that recruiters would ask. But yeah, anytime you talk about the experience, necessarily use a star framework. So today, what we discussed about star framework is how you would talk about your experience. Anyone says, "Hey, let's discuss about some of the work you've done." It is not loosely some things that you have a loose stock on, right? Loose stock doesn't have a structure. So always use a star framework to describe any of your experiences, and always think about how this fits in with the company, right? Don't just go on a ramble on things that are unconnected. So if the company is, for example, let's give an example. Let's say the company is looking for a marketing specialist, right? You would want to necessarily paint your experiences to be a marketing specialist. So talk about brand, talk about product marketing, talk about those things that are necessary for it. So be mindful of how you present, because you always, every discussion is about matching yourself with respect to the company skills. So the team leadership experience that I talked about, it would make sense if I'm only applying for a technical company because it's doing technical roles, software development, right? Ideally, you should talk about some of the technologies we worked on, right? But if this is a role, for example, as a consultant, it makes no sense to talk about software development in the larger framework of how it fits in with the consultant role. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay. Screen share. Select entire screen. Allow. Okay. From current slide. Right. Quickly about jargons. There's a few of the jargons, I guess, that comes up. It really depends upon which space you are in. If you're in software, you would hear a lot of things related to software technology, right? If you're back end, if you're front end, you would see things related to it. You talk about libraries. Yeah, you will talk about Git. You will talk about merging. You will talk about like how you would actually work with a group of people in those terms. If you're someone related to operations, you talk about silos. You'll talk about bottlenecks. You will talk about the flow throughput rates and stuff like that. In general, you would hear things like let's talk about deep dives, low hanging fruits. If it's any sort of management experience, right? You'll talk about bandwidth. You'll talk about yeah. So be mindful of these words that are necessary for your space, because again, you want to you want to give an impression that you have worked enough in the space and understand it well. I would advise against, of course, just spewing out jargons, right? It becomes mean something versus you just spew out a lot of stuff that's out there. Okay. It's critical to have.
Let me share an example of my one of my early campus interviews at IIT Bombay. Okay, so when I was graduating from IIT Bombay, one of the first interviews I faced was a pharma company. So the pharma company question was, "What does being in the black and what does being in the red mean?" I actually said I have no idea, and it did not turn out well. They were like, "Don't even understand what this means," and they tried to educate me by saying that we are talking about revenues and we are talking about profits, and actually that is what it meant. So revenues and profits are what terms we generally use, but pharma companies do not use the same word. They use the words like being in the black and being in the red. So this jargon is sometimes asked to check, do you really understand the industry? Okay, so it is not surprising, not unheard of. Even I faced a situation during one of my early interviews. Over to you, Vibin.
So a counter example on that is when we were actually looking for a program manager at our team. We had a guy talk about some of these things, right? Like Gantt charts. He talked about Pareto charts. He talked about some of the. So they were like a lot of terms and frameworks he used without actually substantiating it. So be mindful that once you talk about a certain thing, to have the depth. Okay, so that's the second part of it. Okay. So again, why are tools and frameworks important? It shows that you have a structured thinking process. You actually are able to. So if you think over it, scientific methodology is all about writing things down and ruling out possibilities. It is almost like a brute force method where you actually look through all possible spaces and then eliminate out possibilities. That's pretty much what scientific method is. It is laborious. It's time consuming. It is very lengthy. It is documentation heavy. And what people want you to understand is, or when you come to workplace, they want you to know that you are into that structured scientific framework, because that's how the world works today, right? It is less driven by intuition. It is less driven by I have an intuition that something is. It could be cool that you have the intuition, but rather people would like to see that you have a structured methodology too on top of the intuition that you have developed. Okay, so common things like you should know about Gantt charts if you're anywhere into product or a program management space, or in fact any management space. You should know about Gantt charts. If you are an engineer, you should know about control charts. You should know about SPC control charts. That's like the basis in which industry runs, right? To have highly controlled, low variability environments for work, right? If you're any sort of like a consultant, you'll talk about why analysis. You try to get into the depth of it, or the Ishikawa's fishbone diagram to actually find out the root cause analysis, right? Any sort of a data analytics or any sort of analytics would have regressions, and then you think about correlations versus causations. Okay, and any sort of works should have some sort of prioritization, right? So prioritization matrix, the 80-20 rule, Pareto rule. So those things all come into play. Okay. So feel free to use talk about these frameworks when you discuss. Hey, this is how I went about solving the problem, right? Eh, think through on also on the experiences that you have had where you have not really used it. Think through on how it actually what you work you did. How does it actually fit to some of these frameworks, so that you can now talk about it. I went about doing this because of so and so reason, right? Like you might have hit upon something by intuition, but it is a as a method of presentation, it's a good idea to start thinking more analytically and then presenting it that way. Okay, so there are that's not all with the star questions ideally. So let me give you an example. So when we both went, so Vinod and I both did our MBA from US. So Vinod did from Wisconsin Madison, I did from Georgia Tech. Um, we spent, like, as MBA students, you'll be surprised. I'm sure this is the case with the students here too, right? At IIT Roorkee, with other IITs, with IIMs, you would expect the same, right? They're the same level of universities. They have a high standard. Lot of emphasis on the soft skills, right? So emphasis on the work done, but also how do you present the work, okay, as a business school students. So in specifically for Vinod's and my case, we can talk about it. In the first year and second year, like around 20 to 30% of the time was actually spent on preparing and re-preparing for the star interview questions, right? We have a bunch of questions. So in my case, for example, there's like a bunch of 30 or 40 questions. I have like 10 or 15 scenarios, 10 scenarios that I actually repurpose for all these. I actually wrote all these down and then practice on an everyday basis, right? With friends, with family, with other interviews that I sit on until it hones to a perfection. So you do this repeatedly. It's not just for your MBA time. So post MBA, all the interviews that I sat through, I've had to go through the star interviews. But after a period of time, it becomes like your second nature. You start explaining things in that word. It may not be 100% there, but even if it's 80% there, it's fine. It is bad to be in the 10% or 20% there. So think always in terms of situation, task, action, result. Talk a lot about actions. Definitely talk about results. Give them a background. Don't ambush them with actions, right? Give them the situation so as to like slowly slide them into the situation and then talk about the things that you did. Okay, but there are questions that Vinod and I have collected. You can join the community that you saw earlier, or drop Vinod a note, and he should be able to help you get through. Okay. Prepare them. Don't take this lightly. This is going to be a make and break for all interviews. So do write answers down. Practice with your friends to actually get some value out of it. Okay. So how do I practice? Exactly this: 30 questions, 30 sheets. Write down the answers. Use the STAR framework. Right. Quantification, the results are going to be a tough part, but yeah, you spend time trying to quantify it. You should have, ideally your action should be 4 or 5 points, right? And you should have depth to it. So if I question you later on the actions, you should be able to drill down. So one point, you should be able to really talk about one point for about like 15 to 20 minutes. But on the interview, you just want to talk about the key highlight, like one point for a minute, or let's say 45 seconds or 30 seconds, and then talk about the 4 points for roughly 2 minutes to 3 minutes, right? That's going to be your actions. So you're going to talk in detail about it. Rehearsals are key. Practice with your friends, practice with your family, practice with anyone you can find, practice with a stranger. Just keep practicing, because practice makes perfect. Nobody is good. In fact, I remember with the feedback that I had was when I went for the first set of, so I was an engineer, not really aware of the STAR frameworks. So when I went for MBA later, when I was practicing it, the first set of interviews, I remember someone telling me this is the worst candidate they ever seen in their life, right? So, or that I actually ended up speaking for 45 minutes on one STAR question, right? Because I felt that was important. But again, that's not understanding what the nature of the interview is. So, but that was a really bad interview process. So everyone goes through that. I had comments that said that my initially when I went there, my accent and the way I spoke was very Indian, right? We are Indian, so we speak in a very Indian accent. And also the presentation Indian, that is, it branches out. There's a lot of ways it was not presented out very clearly. So initial set of interviews had feedback saying this guy is not a good communicator. He has problems with speaking the English language. So remember that it's not your problem. It is the American problem, or the world outside how it works. What you can do is, of course, you can practice to make yourself better. So if I'm any sort of a communicator today, if I'm able to talk about points, if I'm able to talk through entire presentation, it is because of regular practice. So rehearse, practice, practice, practice. Practice will make perfect. Okay. So this is an insider trip. I think it's very critical, because I've seen that there are things called information sessions where we have like someone from the industry come over, right? An HR person, a manager come over and present about their company. And I'm not going to name the name and shame in IIT, but I was in one of the IITs where actually there was an information session, and the person actually asked the group. I think there were like 50 or 60 people present in the audience. They asked them like, "Do you know what we do?" Right? And there was a deafening silence. Right, and I hear that the person said lost interest in the IIT right away, and then left from the IIT without hiring from anyone. So my point about information session is, information session can be an excellent opportunity to actually showcase yourself and present yourself and ensure that you actually get an interview call. So if someone comes for an information session, these are key things you need to know. Do anyone attending that interview, the information session, where let's say, for example, let's say Samsung comes over, you should ideally prepare for those session. You should know what is Samsung doing, what are the different business units, why are they coming over here, what kind of roles are they taking for, what are the latest problems. You should look through some of their the financial reports, should see some of their successes, and then have some things in mind of what you want to, like, you should have a very clear idea of the company and a set of questions that you want to talk about that are related to your space, right? If you're product management, you might want to talk something. Engineering, you might want to know something critical for your space. And then end of the day, so after in the interview on the information session, if there are some questions, or if, for example, if there's a question asked on, do you know about the company, if you know it, please volunteer. That shows that you are interested. People note those things. And also, if they're asked for questions, and if you have some many meaningful question, please ask it out. It again highlights you as a candidate. And finally, at the end of the information session, if they stand there waiting to meet and talk to people, please ensure that you have a copy of your resume tailored for the company or the role. Go there specifically and express your interest. This is key. Just let them know that, hey, I am really interested in company X, right? Your company, and I've read these things. I'm looking for these. Like, can you highlight some things for me, or like, how do I make this like a great candidate profile, right? Ask those questions that show the interest you have for the company. An interesting example, right? So when Vinod was in Cornell, he actually met so Samsung had come for an information session, and Vinod actually went ahead. At the end of the session, he went ahead. There were a lot of people there, and there all of them had come over. But Vinod specifically, when they were looking for candidates to come to Korea, so Vinod went specifically and said, "Hey, I am really interested in the Korea role. This is my resume. How do I ensure that I can be in front of the team hiring, right?" the the person who had come over, the HR person came over, noted that please consider this important, please consider it, and handed it over. So Vinod did get the interview, and that happened because Vinod specifically asked for the role they were hiring, which was roles for Korea in US. Right? They come in US to hire for roles in US in Korea, while other people did not use the opportunity. Vinod did, and they consequently had interviews and able to like crack the interview. Okay. Okay. Before we move on, I think there are a few things that I'll highlight to star interviews, but I think it's critical to call out. So the frequent questions are like, why you, right? Why should we consider you? It's not put as bluntly, but it could be things like, tell me, like end of the day, they'll say me that, hey, we have been interviewing a lot of people. Why do you think you're a good fit, right? It's put bluntly, or it would be like, what makes you interested in our company, right? You could ask, let's more politely, they will ask you, why are you interested in this role, or why are you being, why do you think you would be a great fit? Okay. uh, so key things: show your enthusiasm. Passion burns everything else. If you're passionate, 80% of your problems are solved, because they know that you want to work for the company. You're a person who learn and develop. Okay, so that's again the point number 3 is you should show your willingness to learn. So always show that you're passionate about company, that you're willing to learn. Identify why that company, why that sector, and why that role, right? And how your skills fit in with that respect to the skills, the job skills that we talked about yesterday, and to some extent today, right? How do you bring the skills? So think of yourself like a salesman. What you're trying to sell is your fit for the company, right? And you talk about how you are fit for the company and fit for the role. Okay, so think about those terms. Don't just go ramble about like I am the most awesome person on the universe, right? Or I'm from the great university called IITs, and therefore I deserve it. Don't be in that mode. Be into like how you are such a great fit for that role, and sell those skills to those companies. Talk about how you are a fit, and if there are not fits, talk about how you learn and grow. Okay, your passion reflects. Be energetic, be always passionate, and that's a key thing to ensure that you're able to shine. Okay. Similarly, it's a part of the same why you, but it's also a question like why this role, right? It also comes separately as oh, you are a great fit for, like, I see you're passionate, but why this role and why not? So it's typically for freshers that I hear this question, that is, why do you want to be in product management and not any other space, right? Or why do you want to be a consultant? You've done engineering work, or you've done something else, right? Why do you want to be a consultant, right? That's a question that is asked. So always talk about again the fitment, why your skills match with respect to so your prior experiences, right? How the prior experiences matches to the job description. And also talk about how you would fit in with the company for a long term, because remember, company hires you, and they hope that when they train you and develop you, that you will pay back that, right? And to pay it back, you need to be in a company for a long term. So even though the economy may be up and down, you might not really know at this point of time whether you'll stick with the company for like a very long time. um, give them the benefit of doubt, right? And give with the understanding that if the environment is right, you would want to stay in the company for a long term and help pay them back, right? So be honest, go with an open mind. Talk about your long term plans, not for like, if you have long term plans as doing a startup, don't talk about those kind of long term plans. Talk about long term plans with respect to the company, right? And again, at that point of time, a plan is a plan until you actually execute it. So you might want to be an entrepreneur, you might not want to be a person working in a company. That's perfectly fine, because both of them are dreams, right? As life happens, a lot of things happens, nobody really, like, people do not know what the future is. But you can know what, if you were in a company, what you would actually do for them. So bring that dream out, sell that dream to that company. Okay, you're selling dreams. Okay, and therefore talk about how that role fits you with that dream. Okay. Similarly, on why this company, it's just a typical question. Why are you considering this company, right? It is necessarily important that you first read about company, read about their, look at their things like their financial data, their release like for example, Google comes out with a lot of information sessions, like, or have some big meetings. Apple has the big meetings, annual meetings. Amazon has meetings, for example. You may want to look at those and have an idea of where their future is and how you fit in, and you have a very good idea of the company or the industry, right? So those are general information that help you talk about why that company, what is that space that they are working that excites you and makes you interested in that company. Not just a role, right? On a larger picture, what is a vision for the company that drives you towards that? Uh, a more fundamental thing is to always talk to your seniors or people in the industry that you know, right? Your friends who are working in, like, say, if you're looking for let's say McKinsey. If you have a friend working in McKinsey, you want to have that conversation with him and him or her, and identify what she has been doing, right? And see how you can actually fit. And then over the information session, when you, or the interview, when you talk about why this company, you can say, hey, I talked to this person, right? She was working for McKinsey as a consultant, and she's my close friend. She told me these are the key skills, and she also thinks that I am a great fit, right? So bring that connection in, bring that network in. Always try to network with people within the industry, so you can use like name drop where necessary to say that you've done your homework, you talk to people, you understand what the company culture is. Okay. This is a critical tip, actually. Even if you're an engineer, you'll be surprised. Annual reports give a lot of insights that you can glean if you're smart. I wouldn't say you're smart. If you're watchful, right? You're aware. You can glean. For example, like you can think about their revenue growths, their cost layout structure, their money they hold in the bank, their long-term assets with the short-term assets. You have a very clear idea of what the company is going to do in the future based on these. And why is that important? One, it will tell you things that you might want to talk in interview. For example, there are certain key projects that you want to discuss and say that, hey, I'm reading of these, I'm aware of it, and I would like to contribute. That may be one way. The even more critical thing I feel is that it helps you calibrate on what that company is looking for. So for example, if it is let's say if it is a company that is going through cost cutting measures, right? So its economy has been tough, the company has been trying to stay profitable by cutting down on costs. You understand that it is a skills that you bring and the ability to like grow a certain a product or increase the customer base, that's going to be very important. Increase revenue through that, through those models. Trying to like cut down on, like, say, legacy products may be very critical for the company, and that may be exciting for you to talk about. For example, you can talk about, hey, if for example it's Google, right? You can come out with the fact that you have these kind of products which are not really being used based on the data I saw here and there. We may think about how do we go ahead, make that as a legacy product, right? That's very nice to hear for a company that is actually trying to cost cut and reduce the number of portfolio of products that they have. Okay. Okay, so again, why this sector similar, I don't think, I'm not going to belabor this point. Use all those things that I said earlier to actually also answer similar questions. Sector normally is a lot of people, not just the company. It is also its competitors. So you should know about companies of the competitors. You should be able to benchmark. You should be able to talk about why this company is better than everybody else, or where it is lagging behind, how you can improve, right? Be aware of those dynamics. Okay. Every interview is going to end with, do you have some questions for me? And I'm telling you, this is going to be a key make or break, right? Many of the people I have talked to say, hey, I have no questions, right? That's a worst answer you can give us. You have no questions. Okay. The second worst answer you can give us, ask a inane question okay, what is the company culture like? Okay, that's kind of inane. That is kind of not a great question, but at least it's better than asking saying no questions. Ideally, these 2 3 the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes is an opportunity for you to ask key things related for you to be successful at work. So great questions would be like, given that you have hired people, what are the things that someone needs to be prepared for walking into the role that help them to be successful? Fantastic question. Yourself into the picture and thinking about how do you prepare for that role, right? That's a fantastic question. A second fantastic question can be that, hey, I have read so and so opportunity. For example, if it's Salesforce believes a lot in, say, volunteer opportunities. You can say that, hey, I'm actively involved in so and so volunteer work. I know that Salesforce is part of the volunteering work, and it's actively part of how they develop their community. Can you talk to me about some of the opportunities, how I can involve as going forward? Fantastic. Again, it shows that you have done your research, looking about the company, doing some of the things that are critical or valuable to them, and you're already, even before joining, asking how you can go and be a fit for that company. Okay. Bad questions are like, for example, some of the bad questions I asked for the Google interview. I was sitting for YouTube. Actually, I was sitting for they hired. I mean, they take product managers generally, and then they specialize them. So I was happening to talk with an engineer from YouTube, and we had a very good interview. It went really well. Towards the end, he had these questions on, "Do you have questions?" And I was asking on, "Hey, there are so many ads coming up, right? And people are using ad blockers, right? Isn't that hitting?" Like, it was voiced very badly. I asked him like things like, "Isn't that hitting your revenue? How are you guys handling with it?" Again, very sensitive topic. YouTube engineers do not want to see that kind of, like, people in YouTube might be offended with the question, or take offense to that kind of question. So it was not the greatest question to ask. It was no value addition to me too, right? Like, what can I gain from that? If you said something to, how is it going to impact me, right? So it's not a great value addition for me, and it is probably putting him into a kind of like a difficult spot. So again, not a great question to ask. So avoid those kind of questions too. Don't shoot yourself in foot. That's what I mean. Okay, don't ask the randomest, darndest thing that you can think of in that place. Be prepared. So again, be prepared by preparing a list of things that you want to talk about. What happens when you do not meet the skills of a company 100%? I think it's a very good question. I have sat for, like, I hired my own team of 16 engineers when I was in San Fran. I hired maybe like 10 product managers when I was at Amazon. Salesforce, I went for like 15 or 20 interviews. Amazon, again, I sat for maybe 30 or 40 interviews. In all my interviews, I have never ever seen a candidate who has been approved by everyone. There's always candidate who is like, every candidate doesn't like. There are some high points, there are some low points, there are things that skills that don't really match. So there is, when I look at, like, after a set of interviews, when we all come together, like 5 6 interview rounds, we all come together to discuss a candidate. Normally, I've seen that there are opinions that are not really good for all candidates, right? They have a few highlights of the candidates. Now, interesting thing that happens during the discussion rounds is the highlights are so good of a interview of the candidate that the interviewer is able to defend the candidate, saying, "You know what, I found so much potential for him, and therefore I do not think those lowlights that we see for the candidate matter." And that is necessary for you. So when you talk about things, um, do not be worried about, "Hey, I screwed up some specific question." What you want to do is, fine, move on, do those things that you represent did well, really well, because you want to have set of people who talk for you and defend you on the selection rounds. Okay. End of the day, it always happens, like, if there are, everybody is may, like, okay, like, I don't really have any negative points, or someone, "You know what, I have a problem here." Someone is a strong yes, there's always a competition between the strong yes, strong no, and depending on how they're able to talk it out, you have a candidate who's selected. Okay. You'll not meet 100%, but ensure that you try to meet more than not meet, right? You want more people to be in the may and yes rather than no, right? Okay, we'll jump to communications, but let's pause here and ask a set of questions. I think communications are going to be a quick thing. Uh, or why not I quickly run through that, and then let's have the sessions after. Okay, let's do that from current slide. Okay, okay, a few key things. Make eye contact, right? Don't look down, don't look up when you're talking. eye Eye contact is way how we normally speak to each other. um, Talk clearly, talk slowly, hopefully. I am actually a little more fast than normal. Don't be like me. Be a little bit more slow. I used to be very fast, but I slow down. This is what you see now is really slow down a lot, right? So if you are talking fast like me, please slow down. It always helps to slow down a lot, because it's easier to enunciate each word if you slow down, right? Smile. Hopefully, I've been smiling. I hope so. I can't see myself, but hopefully it's a natural process. But smiling puts the other person at ease. Don't always be smiling, right? Don't have that grin on your face all the time. That's just something wrong with you, right? But generally be pleasant and smile. And know that, be confident, right? You have only yourself to, like, push yourself forward. Whatever happens, life happens. So be confident, be happy. Things happen. Like I sat for 150. The first the post MBA, when I got my first job, I sat for like I applied for 150 companies. I had like maybe 40 interviews to get that one job. Okay, nasty rejections, not so nasty rejections, good rejections, but rejections never the same, right? So you happen to go through them. It's okay. Be confident. Things will look up afterwards. So be confident, be hopeful, be always positive. That's very critical. Okay, sit straight. Don't be bent. It shows that you have maybe some physical sickness, which is not the case, right? It makes people uncomfortable. Hey, is it so tiring for a person to sit and listen, hear me out, or even talk to me, right? Don't be that type. um, be always dressed on the overdressed part. Overdressed in the sense, not to wear flamboyant, right? Don't be like I don't know, like any of the stars, right? Be formally dressed. Wear a crisp ironed new white shirt if it's for guys. um, for women, of course, the right attire, right? You can work with your colleagues to find out what is the right attire, but for guys, generally crisp pant, crisp shirt with a coat, overcoat, and a tie that makes you like decently dressed. Cut your fingernails and all this stuff. Ensure that things are ironed, well groomed. I think these kind of things go across the board. I mean, across genders, right? Always be crisply dressed, ironed, pressed, neat, clean, formal clothes. Even for an engineer interview, unless it is specifically stated that engineers are allowed to, I mean, you are supposed to walk in casual. Don't walk in casual. Okay, you can be casual later, but as a dress in, be always overdressed and be well groomed, rather than like, if you have hair, unlike me, trim it, keep it well, um, keep it trimmed, keep it cut short, right? That's normally the style that's looked for in industry. Okay, be fluency in grammar. I just want to touch on it. Be clear, communicate well. If English is not your things that you're practiced for a long time, English is of course a language of communication in any interview process today. All right. If you have issues related to fluency, that's okay as long as you're clear. So if you can slow down and enunciate is spell it out really well, that's fine. um, if you ideally have fluency, and if you have a well structured thought process, build that out. If you do not have it, start practicing from today such that you have built your fluency. Okay. um, so that's a key thing. Be slow, be methodical, be structured. I think that's critical. Don't be distracted. Just don't look somewhere else when someone asks you, hey, what did you ask me, right? Don't be that kind of thing. Don't, if a question is asked, don't answer something else. Be confident, don't be hesitant. If you ask someone, don't begin with I might be wrong. Like, if you begin with you might be wrong, you mostly are wrong, right? Don't be that kind of person. Be always state things out. Be confident, be bold. Okay. Close gestures are things like this. Don't be like this. It shows you're uncomfortable, you're trying to close yourself. Don't turn away from the person you're talking to, right? Don't look down. Those are all close gestures, right? Be open. Use these broad gestures. Keep your hands out. Okay, we know there's a couple of videos actually on Career Bo channel. You guys can watch it. Or you can watch other videos on like what is a body language and how to make it good. There's a very good TED Talks by Amy Cuddy. Even though the science is kind of like bonkers, there is you will find article that says that the science is not really true. I personally feel it is a big boost for people who have issues related to feeling non-confident. Right? You have these big gestures like before interviews, you raise your hands, breathe well, be pumped up. I think those work. If you'd have watched the Microsoft, who was that? Who was the guy? Steve Ballmer. If you watch Steve Ballmer, he used to jump on table and dance before going for interviews and stuff. That's extreme, but I understand where that's coming from. It's basically to pump yourself up. Okay, watch Amy Cuddy's video. It's pretty awesome. If you have not watched already. Okay, how do interviewers decide? Again, behavioral questions. You can standardize, you can calibrate, you can rank candidates. It's a bunch of people. It's not just one person. Normally, interviews are handled by a bunch. Like you'll have 3 rounds of interview where 3 people will interview. They take their notes. They look at the skills. They mark you with respect to skills. They highlight the key points, goods and the bads. Your technical skills, your communication skill, your people skills. All those things you write it down, and then over the next day or when they meet, they or a bunch of other interviewers would sit together and rank each of the candidates. Okay, and then say, okay, this person is awesome, this person not so awesome, and this is why I agree, disagree. Then we come to a consensus. Okay. If you go through where you don't get shortlisted, remember this. Firstly, a lot of things. The market is there may be. So I ask you to think through that. Hey, um, market is bad. But if it's a numbers game, so if you get the numbers game right, things will start to look better. But even if with the numbers game, like if people are coming to campus, they're not really shortlisting your resume. You might want to think about analytical, do that fishbone diagram kind of thing. But you'll quickly come to things like, hey, if everybody of my friends are getting, but I'm not getting this, something on my resume selection case, right? If it's just a shortlist part, or if it is if you have okay. If you guys are writing a bunch of exams, then you may want to like improve those exam answering skills. But if it is related to things like resume screening that you guys are getting kicked out, you might want to think about, hey, what are the job skills, and am I really presenting that job skills? Is my resume tailored for it? You might want to spend some time over there. If it's a cover letter that enhances, you might want to write a better cover letter. Okay, that's on resume screening. But if it's interviews you're getting through, again, it might be a bunch of things, right? Technically, you might not be good. You might have to introspect. So always have the introspection along with your advisor, career development advisor, or your friends. You might want to introspect to see where is it you're failing. Is it that you're not able to communicate things well? Is your technical skills not practiced? Do you have experiences, but your communication is generally good, but is that you're not able to structure it like a star interview answer and present it out? Okay, those things do a little bit of work.
Guys, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, sir.
So, folks, I'll continue the conversation. Okay, so let me go back to the slides. So, what Vibin was saying is that if you're not able to clear the interviews, it's pretty much a process of trying to understand where is the problem. Is it a problem with the resume, in terms of like you're not able to present yourself the right way, or is it a matter of like you're not prepared enough for the interview process? So, those are some of the things you'll have to check. And the more you practice, the higher your chances of success. Uh, if you don't get a job, do not worry, things will work out. Keep interviewing, keep talking to people, it will definitely work out in the end. Ultimately you will get the jobs you deserve. Every single person will get the job they want. It'll take a little bit of time, it may take 1 month more, 2 months more, so relax, things will all work out. Okay. uh, at the same time, keep practicing on your skills. If you're a computer science, get to lead code, practice more. If you want to practice interviews, go forward, talk to your friends, practice. Reach out to startups. That's an easy way to find jobs because they're desperate for talent and they cannot pay that well. So if you can make sure that you apply to startups, even with lesser compensation, you could get the jobs you're targeting. Okay. So also don't forget, higher studies can always be an option. If you feel that you're not getting the right jobs, maybe improving your skills through higher studies could be a good opportunity. Okay, so pretty much we're going to wind up here and leave this floor up for questions. Questions from the folks here. We pretty much at the end of the conversation. If you want to continue chatting with us, you can do it over the WhatsApp group. You have my email ID. You can reach out to us. But let's come back to you folks. Questions.
Sir, this is Kaustav here.
Yes,
So,
Kaustubh.
what is the best way to go ahead with behavioral questions, like which are typically asked in interviews?
So, Kaustubh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload some 30 questions. Most students will be asked in interviews. So, I've been working in HR for almost like 10 to 15 years. uh, I used to work in Samsung Electronics in Korea, where I used to lead the IIT campus recruiting drive. So there's just so many questions which are very very similar. Every company asks the same question again and again. So what I highly recommend is go to my WhatsApp group. I'll upload the 30 questions. Jot down those questions and ask yourself, how will I answer those questions if I'm asked those questions in interview process? So list down using the STAR framework: situation, task, analysis, actions, and results, and write down 2 to 3 bullet points under each one of those headings in terms of what example are you going to share and what bullet points are you going to share. And likewise, right, come up with like 30 questions, 30 answers. If you practice that, you will 100% clear any HR interview process, and any behavioral interview process shouldn't be a problem. Vibin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you answered. I think it's perfect. Monica has a
Thank you.
question, so I thought I'll take. Oh, sorry, Kaustav, you have follow up.
No, sir, I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Monica has a question which is related to. I think this is very critical. I have seen this quite a bit. So, how do we address questions related to gaps in CV? So, there are gap years, guys. I seen that across candidates. It's I've heard that last time too when I was at Roorkee. So I'm going to rephrase some of the answers that I put. So I'll put my thoughts. I'll have Vinod also share. But firstly, if there are gaps in your resume, you might want to target jobs that don't care about gap years. And what do I mean? So there are jobs that are purely skill focused and based on your ability to execute. That's important, right? It doesn't matter what is a gap and what are those rules. Those are rules related to, for example, things in technology, in software. If you have the skill in software, if you have worked on specific code and if you're really good at it, or in data science, it doesn't really matter if you have like gaps or don't have gaps. If you're a person who can get job done and get job really well done, these are very technical fields. Of course they don't really care like what you do. Like if you had gaps, that's fine. It's okay. Okay. Where is the other place like where this kind of gaps are overlooked are startups. Okay. Startups have a issue of I need to deliver and I need to deliver in a short time and I do not have that much money to pay the people that I'm looking for. Okay. So you might want to think about startups as a way to actually showcase how you can add value and where you will deliver on it. Okay. Thirdly, non-profits. Non-profits, this includes universities and others. So there are roles for non-profits that are as competent and as detailed as the corporate world, right? You can think of NGOs, you can talk about think of industries or universities, or you can think about government bodies, right? These are trying to achieve large, massive scale change, but not with the same constraints that industries operate, just profit-driven quarterly deadlines and stuff like that. So that's again a fantastic region to think about. Hey, how do I go ahead present myself as a fit for those kind of people? Very different strategies, but again, those are the three things that you need to think about. Okay. So first part of the gaps, when you have gaps, you want to focus upon clearly those places which do not consider gaps. Okay. Now that might not be possible. You might be interested in a very traditional, let's say you are looking for McKinsey, right? The most premier of those companies that that are very picky about the titles, picky about your background, your pedigree, right? They're very picky on that you have done things according to structure, right? Now it is really hard to sell yourself to a place where the expectation is you to have no gaps. Okay. So I would say if you're targeting such companies, you need to reimagine whether that's the kind of company you're going to target. And in case it doesn't matter, I want to target only those companies that are narrowly going to interview me for they're going to test me on those gaps and on my pedigree. Then you need to have something spectacular on your thing that covers up for the gaps. For example, if you're in management school, right? If you have if on the time of your doing your work you've done on certain things, or you worked as an internship, you can cover with internships at a certain leading companies, or you've done extremely strong leadership skills, and you have like let's say you ran certain things within the organization, within your university, and took it to premium heights, right? Then you can cover up for the gaps and you can say, hey, I've showed extremely great leadership skills and therefore I can cover up for it. Okay. But these are extremes. Normally what happens is you would end up in a scenario where people are concerned of your gaps but not looking too much about pedigree. They are really concerned that you'll be able to execute, and they want to know why is it that you have like a gap, right, within your years where you did things. You would want to talk about those gaps in a meaningful way. So if you have done, if there is some kind of project or work that you have done during the period that you had missed, like for example, you took some time off to say let's prepare for UPSC exam, and if there was a side project you did, maybe you can talk about that side project and say I was invested in developing that side project. Okay. What people don't want to hear is you are someone who actually drops everything and think only about that other thing, and then consider it as an afterthought. Hey, I'm thinking of a career in industry as an afterthought, right? That's a rather difficult sell. Um, so if you are someone, for example, who has done like a lot of years in, say, UPSC preparation, and if you are trying to do it, trying to bridge back into industry, you might want to talk about, hey, I did some projects during my period, or I did some training or help of other people, right? Basically, you are not idle. In the time that you were not doing industry work, you want to say that you doing either developing yourself certain skills, courses, skills, or something else, or you are trying to develop on certain technology or a software or something of that nature. You're trying to develop. You cover those as best here. Talk about what you learned during those periods, and talk about, hey, I use this time to actually skill develop myself. Even UPSC can be that I use my things to because improve my fluency. I use this as a way to actually get a better understanding of the world, and I actually am a much mature person because I'm able to put these like analyze things much better. Okay, that's largely it. Use that. You definitely do lot. If you are a person who has gap, ensure that when your time at university, you do a lot more internship. If someone does 2 internship, do 10 internships if you have time. If you have time in your hands, please go ahead, do as much internships as possible to say that, hey, I'm a person who has been like making use of maximum use of my time now to actually cover up for the things that I missed out. Okay, that's my advice, 2 cents on the whole thing. Any other thoughts, Vinod?
Thank you, sir.
Other questions, guys?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think there are some people here who probably want to do some resume reviews. So why don't we do it this way, right? We'll send a resume checklist on a WhatsApp group. It's a self-evaluation. Get it done, and then maybe if you have further questions, we'll try to catch up maybe next week or the week later, maybe through CDC, or we'll set up a separate Zoom call. We'll give you personalized feedback. We have done multiple sessions for IIT Roorkee, so none of you are strangers to us. We have been there to campus last year, met a lot of people there. We went a tour around campus, so it was one of some. We met a lot of people, so happy to do some additional sessions for IIT Roorkee. And many of the folks we talked to from IIT Roorkee from last time, I think most of them ended up getting very good jobs, even though it was a bad placement season. Most of them ended up with good jobs, and we did give them tips on how to get through the job search process. So use us as a resource, and we'll be definitely there to help you folks. And CDC team, if not anybody else, then maybe we'll try to wind down.
Yes, I think we can end the session. I don't think anyone has any questions.
Okay. Okay, then, folks. Cheers, everyone. Be in touch. Be in touch through WhatsApp. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers, folks. Take care. Nice talking to you all.
Thanks, everyone.